Hey, I'm Jacob Cooperman, and you were watching the MMA Conspiracy Hour with Todd Atkins and Miguel Iturrate. Todd has been involved in covering combat sports since the 1990s, and Miguel has match-made over 200 different events amongst various promotions worldwide. Please subscribe and be on the lookout for future episodes. As for me, you can check me out at Gloves Up on YouTube and Coop TV with 3 O's on Instagram. Thank you guys, and enjoy the episode.
All right, so this is Todd Atkins, and I'm back with Miguel Iturrate, this MMA Conspiracy Hour. Most popular episodes we have, and it's good to do another one. And I think this one's going to be interesting because Miguel had brought up an interesting topic to cover. And before we start, I just want to ask people to subscribe to the channel, and we have memberships and things like that. Just support the channel. We've been doing this for a long time, and I put a lot of work into it. So just check it out, share it with somebody if you like the episodes. And today we're going to talk about Miguel has a theory that it's possible that Dana White could be leaving the UFC to be an advisor to President Trump, or that he may already be an advisor to President Trump as is. But I want to give you some kind of lay out your overall synopsis of this.
It's been interesting because, Dana, throughout the years, obviously we know, his level of energy, and, he's a force to be reckoned with. And, he's done what he's done with the UFC, which is, blast it into the mainstream, using energy. And, whether you like him or hate him, the guy's successful. But at no point until maybe in the last, and we've seen him shake hands with Trump and, have Trump at the events. But at no point has he ever shown any interest or inkling of, political, he said, I vote for who I want. And, he's been his outspoken self. There are a few quotes like that, but not peering at political events. You know what I mean? And now this is a situation where when the Republican National Convention, a lot of people know this, but if you don't, at the Republican National Convention, there's this whole 3-day show where, people give speeches and they're beginning to rah-rah, and you're building up to Trump, who's obviously, they've already decided as the nominee. So everybody's kind of, taking a knee and hyping up what's to come. And Trump speaks on the last day. And lo and behold, after several, other appearances with Trump in the run-up to this, Dana White himself is the person that comes out on stage and is actually the person, and this is, if anybody's watching the Republican National Convention, this is the moment that you're watching it, is to see Trump's speech. And it's Dana White that introduces Trump in about a 5 or 8 minute speech. It's a short speech. And you can tell even Dana was a little bit nervous. He was licking his lips and kind of looking around and stuff like that. But you could also sense his charisma coming out. And, he was drinking up the moment and enjoying it. He thanked the Nelk boys at the end of it, which, is another story. But he was the person that actually introduced Donald Trump. So this interested me a little bit because it's like, what's Dana doing in that spot? That may have been, I'm not sure at what point they had intended Barron Trump to speak at the convention. He actually, at the end of the day, they announced that he was going to be one of the speakers at the convention. And at the end of the day, he did not speak. And that may be, what happened is that Dana came in to pinch hit for him. It would make sense that his son would introduce him as well. Rumor there is that Melania actually pulled the plug on that because she's very protective of Barron. And there are other things that are said about him. I mean, the kid has his moments of being very impressive, but she's very protective of him. And Dana may have been pinch hitting, but again, in a political world, how did Dana cut the line, kind of thing, and why would Dana cut the line there? And so I go back to it. I did some looking. The Zuffa purchase of the UFC is officially labeled coming in on January 1st. But the January 1st, or January of 2001, rather. I'm sorry, January of 2001. But the November 2000 UFC that went down in New Jersey was, I believe, UFC 28. Definitely Dana and the Fertittas already had an imprint and already knew what they were going to do, because the sanctioning from the New Jersey State Athletic Control Board wouldn't have come without Lorenzo Fertitta's influence. Now, if you look back at it, that UFC 28 was at the Trump Taj Mahal. So you could actually trace back possibly to that point they met. So they've known each other well over 2 decades. The UFC went on under Dana after January 1st to do maybe a half dozen more events in the Trump Taj Mahal. And then, the bottom line is the Trump Taj Mahal is a 5,000 seat arena. So they kind of started to grow a little bit, and they moved into bigger arenas and stuff. And, they thanked Trump and stayed friends, but probably didn't cross paths for a decade, what I mean? As Dana charged off to do his thing, and, Trump was always, one of the busiest guys around. So, but they remain friends, and they remain having respect for each other. And then, the way we know Trump, as Dana rose and Dana's, net worth rose and stuff like that, Trump will label him a winner. You know what I mean? That's his word. This guy, I remember him, and he kept on winning, and so he would keep him on his radar, and that's how the friendship stayed. At some point, Trump started coming to the UFCs, and some of the fighters, and Trump, thinks of himself as a bird of a feather with the fighters. He fights, fight kind of thing. He fights in a different arena, but the guts, the never say die attitude, the giving, never give up, the fight to the death kind of thing. Trump will use any one of those descriptions to describe himself. So he has that kind of machismo kind of, and we've talked about rich people that associate with the fighters. They're all over the world, really. They consider it something cool as well, that boosts their ego, and the fighters, obviously treat them, like well and stuff like that. So it's a win-win relationship. They stay together. Hold on a second. So when they reconnected, again, Trump had been president. Now he's coming to the UFCs. I think he may have actually attended the UFC as president. I'm not sure if that's the case, but they started to benefit from each other. And now Dana's a man, back in, 25 years ago, he was in his mid 20s. Now, I think he's 55. So, but still, how does Dana White turn out to be the guy that introduces Trump? And we've also gone on to suspect, Dana's enthusiasm for the UFC isn't what it was, in 2005, 2007, 2010. There are times where he looks bored. There are times where he looks annoyed. There are times where, he's been distracted by things like slap fight and, BMX or whatever other interests he's had and stuff like that. And that wasn't the old Dana. So he's kind of, and we've even gone on to speculate that he might, be thinking about leaving the UFC, or might even, be asked to leave the UFC depending on, how the lawsuits go or whatever like that. So I started to get to thinking, maybe Dana White is going to move on to a different role. He could be an advisor to Trump, go out and do, motivational speeches if he needs. He doesn't need money, but if he wanted to keep money flowing in, he could go out and do speeches and appearances and things like that, for a very high fee, especially if he's associated with Trump. Now, I'm not saying that Trump's going to say Secretary of State Dana White, but a president will keep advisors around, and Dana's a guy. They're birds of a feather. They're very type A personalities, And I've described Dana as a person who's been on a long winning streak. He hasn't taken a loss. Since we've met him, really, the company's just gone up, 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 up. There've been little bumps in the road, but even the incident on New Year's when with his wife, he didn't come out of that fired or really with any type of black eye or anything like that. He kind of brushed it off. You could almost consider that another win. Similar to Trump, that's overcome all those types of things. So they really are a lot alike. And I could see Trump pulling him in and Dana allowing him to pull in. Now, why would he do that? Why would you want to be in politics if you've never been in politics before and around these people that, most of these guys, like he just named Elsie Stepanik as the UN ambassador. She's a good example. On the other side of the aisle, you got Buttigieg, the Indiana mayor who was transportation secretary. Most of these people at that circle are Harvard. Those the two I mentioned are Harvard educated. Most of them went to Ivy Leagues, have advanced educations, and Dana's not from that. And Dana's going to be surrounded by people at some point that are going to treat him nice because he's Trump's friend. But at some point, I think his rough edges might show. So why would he even want to be in those places? I wouldn't be comfortable with people of that level all the time being around or whatever. So he does the introduction at the Republican National Convention, and then when Trump wins, Trump actually has some people on stage. His family's on stage, and he's doing a speech. That was a little more of a party kind of thing. There was the golf champion was there. I don't know anything about golf, so I'll forget his name, but it was the golf champion was there as well. But Dana is one of the people that he asked to give a speech. And again, Dana is Dana. The lady who ran his campaign and is now his chief of staff, he asked her to speak and she wouldn't. She didn't want the spotlight, but Dana grabbed it for a few minutes. He didn't care, and he said a few words. What's his motivation? So now let's go back a little bit, and we've talked about the lawsuit that's out there and how it does appear that the lawsuit isn't going to be the end of the world for the UFC. The settlement looks like they're going to accept it and things like that. There'll be the second part of the lawsuit and things, and there'll be other things. But one of the things we've talked about is that the lawsuit really just encompasses the fighters, and that there are other activities that the UFC has been involved with over the last 2 decades. That's even so much the UFC, but Dana specifically. Boxing out the managers, boxing out the clothing companies, controlling all the press and things like that. Things where he was actively moving towards eliminating competition, eliminating criticism, and creating what could be a monopoly. I'm not an expert, but it could be a monopoly. And if some expert, and I looked this up, the Federal Trade Commission has an antitrust division, and the Department of Justice also could be. So there are two entities in the government that could investigate potential monopolies. And if some of those companies have gotten wind of the UFC, I'm sure at least it warrants looking into. Now, I'm not saying that they're guilty or that they would be found guilty after an investigation, but I'm saying there's likely enough evidence for them to say, hey, this warrants a further look. So now, if Dana's buddy with the president, and we know the president has authoritarian tendencies, and would people on those commissions actually make the move? So what I actually suspect could be happening here is that Dana's buying himself and his company 4 more years of clear time, and then if another president comes in, and these places decide to do the investigation, those investigations would be half-decade investigations also. So what he's actually buying himself here is potentially another decade of doing what they want to do the way they want to do it without any type of interference. And that is Mystic Miguel in a conspiracy theory world. But, Dana's always been one step ahead of the competition. So let's say, somebody called Dana up and said, I got a phone call from a DOA agent asking me a couple of questions about my UFC contract. He could put two and two together quickly, and that I think is, I know Trump, and lo and behold, the guy, winners and winners, the guy, whether you like it or not, won the presidency again. I remember back to that dinner where Obama said to him, I can tell you one thing that I'm president, you will never be. And you could just see Trump seething there, you know what I mean? Just sitting there, just like, yeah, yeah, that didn't sit well with him. And it might be Obama to blame if you're not a Trump fan for that statement that motivated him in 2016, in 2020. It caused all the chaos and stuff like that because he didn't want to be, we said they never took a loss. Well, Trump did take a loss in 2020, right? But he came back to win again. And that's something that hasn't happened. It's only happened once in American history for a president to lose and then come back and win after a term went up with another guy. And you have to go back to the 1890s for that. With I think it was Grover Cleveland was the president. So now Trump becomes a historic figure. Becomes he's won again. He's got kind of the attention of the nation. There's still a lot of people that are holding their breath and kind of can't believe this happened, kind of thing, or anything like that. But it did happen, and Dana's ready to move his chess piece in. If he's an advisor to the president and the DOJ wants to start investigating him, how does all that play out behind the scenes? Hey, Donald, these guys are calling me up, and I'm, I don't think Donald would look at the UFC and be like, "Oh, they're a monopoly. Let's break them up." I think he would say they're a huge company. They've done great for the fighters, and he'd be okay with the business, whatever business practice got him there. He's okay with whatever business practices got him to where he is, right? And he doesn't like being investigated or asked about how he does things on his business end, how he values his properties or this, that, the other thing. So I think that, like I said, him and Dana are birds of a feather. I don't think that if the law decides that the UFC is a monopoly, I think that Donald will be one of those people that says, that's not right, or there are other things that didn't. I think he's getting close to prevent a wider and bigger investigation of the UFC and their business practices. That's not out of the realm of possibility. It could be possible that they're just friends and hanging out, but at the end of the day, they're also like almost 30 years apart or 20 something years apart in age. It's like they're not friends like they're doing Thanksgiving dinner together. You know what I mean? Or they didn't do Thanksgiving dinner together 15 years ago type of friends. These guys are friends for these are mutual benefits. When Trump appeared at the UFC, it gave him a lot of young persons votes, a lot of capital with, white males and all that type of stuff. And he benefited from it by, again, he's a cool guy. He likes to fight. He's a billionaire. He's married to a supermodel. It all fits right in. There's a mutual benefit to it. And now Dana is going to say, we gave you appearance. I gave you access to Rogan. I have the reason Rogan was there to help you was partially because of me. These things are all tied together. Us winners need to stick together. And, that DOJ call may never come. Those guys this Attorney General Merritt didn't have the guts to really step on the gas of the pedal because he didn't want to do the fight. And like I said, these guys are hard to fight. Taking them on directly is really, really the same with Trump. Really, really, you got to be ready to fight. That's in that respect. There's a big quote out there of Donald saying that he respects Hillary because she's a fighter, and Hillary did fight him tooth and nail. You know what I mean? They went at it, and Trump won, but that's okay. Hillary, but not a lot of people are like Hillary. You know what I mean? Hillary was a lifelong politician. She had, if she had been able to grab that gold ring, she would have been the first female president. She was all about legacy and things like that. And he derailed that, but she was the last person to take him on with that tooth and nail type of fight. Maybe you could say Liz Cheney did too, but Liz Cheney doesn't have the cash that Hillary had. You know what I mean? She was a minor fight for Donald. Um, so I think these people all sort of stick together. And I think at the end of the day, if anybody was going to investigate the UFC for being a true monopoly, which would be all the angles, which is what would prove the problem, not just that they underpay fighters, because they can settle that as they're trying to do, but to prove a true monopoly that breaks up the company, you'd have to prove all the other issues and all the other items that are out there. And if somebody was going to look into it, they're not going to now. And that's the outside, that's the final effect of what this little friendship and these appearances of Dana are doing. He's protecting his company and his assets.
Right, but also Ari Emanuel was Trump's like Hollywood agent, so there's some connection there too. I think he was actually, I want to say, let me see if it was, because I was just looking at this. He was actually considered for a role, in Trump's, cabinet or whatever you would say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was this time around or last time.
Because Rahm, his brother's a Democrat, right?
Right.
So again, if you want to tie into conspiracy theories that these people are all friends, they all go to the same country clubs, they don't need to do a meeting to plan a conspiracy. They all know what's good for all of them. These things all tie in. And you have a DOJ guy, a lawyer who, went to school, has gotten to a high level, but isn't playing with the elite and with the, Illuminati, for lack of a better word, kind of thing, that just wants to do his job. What's the name of the guy that went after what's the name? The movie with Kevin Costner and Sean Connery, where they went after the mafia. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. People know my reference, and
Oh,
they
the
forget.
Untouchables.
Yeah, the Untouchables, in Kevin Costner's role, a guy like that is maybe has some of the qualities of being a fighter, wanting to do justice, wanting to do the right thing, and he looks at the UFC and he goes, "Man, that lawsuit that's going on is the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of stuff there, and I'm going to look into it further." Should he choose to, he's now not only going to have to face down Dana White and maybe Ari Emanuel, powerful figures already, but he's actually going to have to face down the president of the United States. The guy, he could actually get fired by the president of the United States. That's if he's a DOJ guy or with the other entity, the Federal Trade Commission or whatever. So it becomes a very interesting situation there. And I think that the end state is that it's one of those moves where it's an interest move. Now the guy decides to not look into it, not press charge. And I'm speculating that I'm just saying I believe there's enough evidence that somebody would think when they see it that they could take a look. And I think there's a chess move to prevent that.
Also, I think, this second one, I'm sure that I would assume at least that Dana White has told Donald Trump, look, if we have to change our business practices, we can't run this business. The whole point of us getting to where we were was because of these business practices. If we have to give them
It
up,
may not even that would be a conversation to come after the DOJ or the FTC reveals their cards and says, "Yeah, we are going to look into you." He doesn't need to have that conversation yet. He just needs to keep it close and just say this, that, or the other thing. But you pointed out another. I mentioned the managers. I mentioned the press. I mentioned the clothing companies. Another hint at a monopoly is all the moves that came after the first part of the lawsuit, changes in the contracts, tightening up of the, circling the wagons, tightening up of the ships, preventing fighters from suing them and moving them towards arbitration. Things like that all are further evidence of a potential monopoly that somebody should really study. How often did they do that? They probably did it for every fighter. How did the management structures change and morph into companies that the UFC funnels them to you? Those companies almost automatically take a fighter with promise, a few fights, move him to Dana White's show first, and then into the UFC. And there are not many fighters on record stating it, but I'm sure a lot feel it. And there are a sufficient number of guys that have mentioned it, that these new management companies and these new management structures give you the feeling that they're trying to get the best deal for the UFC and that they're not negotiating more money for you. I interviewed a kid who was a 1-0 amateur many years ago. I don't know if his career developed or anything like that. I haven't followed it. But, it's a different and modern time. This kid was already up to about 3,000 or 4,000 Instagram followers at the age of 18 or 19. He was a big, fit, good-looking kid, 1-0 in MMA, and so it's not in the realm of possibility that he could have made it maybe the Dana White show 8-0 with 30,000 Instagram followers. Would his manager have said, "Well, we already have 30,000 Instagram followers. That's worth at least $5,000 more on the contract"? Does things like that go on? You don't hear about things like that going on. What you hear is 10 and 10. That's what you get when you enter Dana White. Maybe they renew you at UFC again 10, 10, 12, 12, or 10, 10, 15, 15, 20, 20. And that's what people get as they get in the door. And there are guys, there is a pecking order there. There's guys that have more potential in the ring that, you say, we'll bring this guy along. Maybe he's worth tying up with a little bit more money so that we can, hold on to him. If you give him a little bit more money up front, negotiations maybe become easier later. These are all dynamics that the UFC really doesn't even have to deal with because they've got a stock model. What do the managers actually do if they're not negotiating for more money for their guys? All they are is suits that bring you the people and they work for the UFC. That's it. That's an impression you hear behind the scenes. And you've had a few fighters talk about it in public. And we know the structure, House and these other companies. There's a couple of them that behave that way, So anybody who's putting together that puzzle of everything going on there, if the word monopoly doesn't come in your head, especially if you're a lawyer, especially if you're a lawyer working on antitrust for the Department of Justice or for the Federal Trade Commission, if you're not at least curious, then you're not doing your job. So if somebody there was doing their job, they would want to look. Maybe they would investigate, ask a couple of questions, check a couple of emails, this, that, the other thing, and say, yeah, you know what, they're good. But that's not even going to happen because of this. That's my speculation and my Mystic Miguel view of this is that we're never going to know. And that's the problematic thing is that at the end of the day, the people that want to know, which should be everybody, we're never going to know because this is all going to get taken care of and swept under the rug because of these little friendships and moves and people taking care of each other.
I'm not. The reason I say that I think this conversation has already happened is because change of business practices is already part of the second the second class suit. Investigation or no investigation, it already is part. If they try to negotiate a settlement, that is going to be part of the next settlement, whether the Department of Justice gets involved or not. This is already part of it. So that's why I think that, he's trying to stave this one off, because there is going to be change of business, or they're going to go to court and risk giving up even more. Any settlement, though, is going to have to include that, because that is part of the second class.
Well, not necessarily, because part of the settlement could, both parties could give something, and that could be the first thing. Yeah, it was mentioned as part of the first settlement.
It
When we
was,
talked
but what I'm saying is the second one had injunctive relief, as the first one did not. It was part of this. They offered it as part of the settlement, but the second class is the one that has the injunctive relief in it as part of the complaints. The first one was money. And I also think, because the lawyers have got a big giant payout now that they didn't know if they were ever going to get by going to trial, they might have lost. They can push back a lot more, I would think, now that they've got millions in the bank from this first one. They're
never going to use their own money.
Right. But I'm saying they don't have to say, okay, we're going to take this first settlement. They can say, we want more, and we already got paid out on the first one. We don't have to worry about it now.
Well, and what business practices do they want to change? Maybe, at some point they loosen up and they say, yeah, you can, select for example, some of the fighters that are out there now. I don't want to mention any names, because no one really listens, but there's a kid from Michigan that what's his name? He's 22 years old. He's on Dana White's show now. He's undefeated, probably up to 10-0, 11-0. He's going to be in the UFC, and he's a classic.
Austin Boshi.
Yeah, Austin Boshi. There you go. Thank you. The kid is managed by his father. We had guys like Jake Shields that had a relationship with his dad that involved his dad managing him and taking care of him. And isn't that kind of a best case scenario, a cute scenario? Especially when your father's capable. At some point, those types of relationships, we're going to get you a professional manager. It's better for you and things like that. Those conversations are eliminated now. Maybe they just give that back up and deal with a little bit of negotiation. Whereas we've seen what they would then do is not sign Austin and freeze him out. So the change of business practices, isn't going to come completely to everybody's satisfaction unless every aspect of their behavior for the last 25 years is actually looked at in order to determine what they did. For example, whether you like it or not, if you have your own manager or stuff like that, what is a change in business practice going to do? All of a sudden, maybe there will be investors that will come back up, and billionaire type guys that say, okay, let's go ahead and run a promotion. But there's no competition. There's nowhere for these guys to go to compete except for the UFC now. So unless you look at you're going to take the whole structure down. I think the business practice changes will be minor that result from the second lawsuit. What I think needs to happen here is a investigation into the monopoly thing. Let's see what they really did, because we know many of the practices that have screwed over clothing companies and newspapers and other. There are no grassroots homegrown businesses that were allowed to grow along with the UFC.
Well, I think taking out the sunset clauses was huge. They took that out once Francis used the sunset clause. They took that out, and that's a huge one right there.
But little things like that, because it still hasn't changed anything about incoming money or the structure of the contracts in terms of payout, or meant that they're paying more information out. But They may make a little change like that. That will change business practices, and that'll be enough for the lawsuit.
For example, like if I
Think
sign
about
with the UFC and I'm only signed for 4 years, they can't do anything else with me unless I say so. That would be a big change. As to where they can tie you up forever, that's a huge difference, you know?
Yeah, but there's nobody for you to go to anyway. Where are you
Well,
going to go fight? What are the options?
there might be
That's
more
the
options
problem.
if that happens, though.
See, let me ask you a question. Let's speculate, but let's say, and I'm not sure what year Joe Gold sunsetted Full Contact Fighter, the newspaper, but he worked, out of his house getting that thing printed out. And I remember it was 8 pages, the first one, and it got to be a 40-page newspaper that came out every month. It got bigger, the quality got better, the color got better. And I've talked to Joel back in the day about um, making the jump to a color magazine, but he just didn't have the the money yet to do that. And the UFC put out a color magazine, and slowly but surely, Joel faded, got tired, and quit. And then there's no UFC magazine anymore. You know, so it could be argued that that they want to kill him and get rid of him because he could criticize business practices in his newspaper. He was an independent guy. They couldn't control what he put in there, and sometimes they didn't like what he put in there, and they wanted to do their own magazine. There wasn't going to be anybody criticizing Dana White in there. So anyway, this is just speculation, right? But now, what if Joel had gone on? It's something we'll call 2007, like when the Spike TV show came on, as a big jump in the big threshold, the Bonner Forrest fight. If Joel had gone on 3, 4 years after that, there may definitely have been an investor that popped up and said, "Okay, is that what you need? This is what you need. Let's go on this together. Here's the money and go this." And Joel would be the guy sitting at home right now, you know, wealthy from his magazine, and rightfully so because he paid his dues. Now I don't know what Joel went on to do. I don't know, financially how he is. I hope everything's good and he's okay. But I do see him on Instagram putting up nostalgia pieces from back in those old days. And I know that doesn't really pay the bills. So he's got to be doing something else to pay the bills. Whereas he rightfully, with all the groundwork he did, should be living okay from his magazine or from his newspaper. But it was shot down and killed. They also, maybe because of the journalist stuff that we did there, they also started perhaps to restrict him, restrict his cameramen. Keith Mills is a cameraman that worked for Full Contact Fighter and sent them pictures and stuff. And Keith Mills always enjoyed a ringside seat or octagon side seat. Lo and behold, the day came where he came to pick up his press passes and he was in the bleachers. Now, what is a photographer going to do from the bleachers? Little moves like that, as individuals, and that's how you take them as they come at you the day-to-day basis. That's how the business reacts. It's like, oh, okay, Keith can't go anymore. It's like, but you start putting the puzzle piece together of how often that type of move was made that affected somebody that wasn't completely aboard with your program. Slowly but surely, you're cutting throats all across the board. That's what somebody needs to investigate in order to take this whole thing down. And I'm not looking to take the whole sport down, but I'm looking for somebody to say, okay, I'll go in there with a couple of $1 billion to compete with them now because there's 800 fighters that are without a contract and we can pick and choose, split them up, and the UFC is going to have to fight. The UFC is still going to have money in their coffers. They'll have sharp $500 an hour lawyers creating a new contract, and they're still going to be probably the most attractive and best place for you to go make money, even if every contract is nullified. But if there's going to be a chance for somebody to say, I can compete, and I'll go in there and do that. But like, what good does it do for them to take out clauses from the contract, for them to, change a couple of things around, non-restrictive contract? Sure, they could actually probably right now say, you guys can go, Sean O'Malley, you can go fight wherever you want. Where's he gonna go fight? The PFL doesn't have his weight class. Maybe he can fight in one, but one may not, Sean O'Malley's already gotten to the point where he's had good paydays. Sean O'Malley isn't going to go back and fight for 15 and 15 in some other company. You know what I mean? So what they could give him, they could rip his contract up right now. So, like I said, they're in a real, like Donald Trump. It really does look like Dana, Trump, these guys. They're going to get off the planet having lived a charmed life, and there's not much that we can do about it. Even though some of the things they did to get there stepped on other people, a lot of other people.
Yeah, they're definitely more front and center than they were when Trump was trying to get reelected in 2020. You know, with them bringing him out, the entrances, Dana introducing him, Dana at this acceptance, at his winning whatever you want to call that party, and
There's no doubt.
he's much more front and center. That's for sure.
There's no doubt that Dana realizes that through his and keep in mind, 2 million pay-per-views at the max, 2.5 million pay-per-views, whatever it was. The Conor Mayweather fight really wasn't them, So whatever the UFC's maximum pay-per-views are, figure there's 4 people in the room, and still just 10 million people watching. Most of the people that voted have no idea who the UFC is, have no idea who Dana White is, but um, it opened the door towards a younger audience. It got Trump cash as a cool guy, and at the end of the day, also gave him, I'll say, easier access to Rogan. Or Rogan was now, instead of 4 degrees of separation, was 2 degrees of separation away. Dana, Rogan. I'd like to do Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan was like, I don't want to get involved, and all of a sudden he's on Joe Rogan. And then Joe, because Joe's Joe, invited Kamala also, and that turned into another win for Trump. And he did what Kamala didn't. All those people and Joe, that interview has 40 million views. People don't recognize that. So there's an audience there that doesn't watch UFC. So in a world of buddy favors, it's almost as if Donald owes Dana a favor. And Dana knows that. Which is why I speculate that should Dana need protection from a monopoly investigation, should that happen, Trump will protect him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out because, I would assume the judge is going to move that one forward sometime next year. I mean, the previous settlement, whatever you want to call it, like acceptance or hearing, is in February. Right. So I would assume the second one's coming soon after that.
Yeah, the UFC, for the February lawsuit, they're preparing, or for February they're preparing and stuff like that. They can go to court there and say, the second part, we'd like to push back the next hearing to October or November. And they just bought themselves, most of 2025 before they look at it again. The lawyers on the other side, because they got their payday, and now no longer, there's not much that they can do to rush it. Even in many cases, this judge supposedly rushed at some point, them to court or with the threat of court that got the first settlement. But keep in mind that came after 10 years, so there wasn't really the rush part is like the idea that, and I don't want to get into politics, and superficially I could be wrong, but just imagine. So Biden allows inflation to go up to 40%, and then in the last year gets it down to 10% and says, yeah, we've been lowering inflation. Yeah, they're rushing this. After 10 years, there's no rush. They didn't rush anything. It's just a superficial perception. And yeah, I think, like I said, they'll wait, they'll look at it, and I don't know when we'll see the second court. What do they come in and say to the judge? We need till November because of this financial hit, but we're going to come to you with a settlement for the second one as well. The judge will wait, and then they come in and say, oh, we need another 3 months, and they'll wait another 3 months. And this is just speculation, but they'll slowly play a game to extend this. And if those are the entities, we've already seen all the players going after the UFC, the lawyers, the fighters, the judges, then they're sitting pretty. They don't care. There's nothing that's going to change in what we see. It has to be a bigger power. And should that happen, Dana now has a president of the United States that owes him a favor.
Yeah, always, always outstanding stuff, Miguel. I think has great theories and great supporting evidence, so to speak.
Well, if you listen to Rogan, and I don't really listen to Rogan all that much, but this falls under the realm of a conspiracy theory. Mystic Miguel, this is what we do here. This is the conspiracy hour, right? So there may be no basis of truth in this. They may actually just be friends. It's like, hey, did you see? Oh my God, and how are the Yankees doing? That could be the basis of Dana and Donald's conversations. But there's enough going on in the world and enough going on with to get to that level of power and money and stay there, that it's not outside the realm of possibility of things I'm mentioning here. The fact is Donald owes the UFC entity, which includes Rogan, and the last person I mentioned that Dana thanked the Nelk Boys, and Dana ran through a list, 3 or 4 people, some of them I didn't even recognize. And the last person he thanked before Donald Trump hit the stage was the mighty Joe Rogan. Another guy worth probably close to $500 million by now. So,
Yeah, Dana doesn't do anything at that level unless he's getting something out of it. So I think that part is for sure.
Yeah, and Donald got what he wanted, and he got it. Not only you go on CNN, 1 million people watching nowadays. You do the interviews that Kamal did with normal press, and you're looking at under 5 million people seeing each one of those. Then they get chopped up in clips and they get viewed and stuff like that. And she's to be made to look bad in clips as well. So that's unfortunate for her. And she didn't have the guts to step up and do a 3-hour interview with Joe. And that's the one thing that's the benefit to Trump, was that Trump said, I've got the guts to do it. And he sat there and he did it, and he did Theo Vaughn, and he did a whole list of them. He actually credited his son Barron Trump for selecting some of the podcasts that he went on in order to get the most exposure. And more credit to him, because for a 79-year-old man, the energy that he put into this win, and he showed everything we said about him, that he thinks he's a fighter. It's not that he thinks, it's that he is, in his own way. That's why I think that the DOJ guy will probably decide, if he sees evidence that the UFC is a monopoly, he might look up and say, I ain't doing this. I'm just not even doing it, because Dana and him are incredibly difficult opponents on long winning streaks, and that's the thing that manifested itself here. Yeah, Joe Rogan, between Joe Rogan, Dana White, they've got a couple, $1 billion between them, you know. And then you add the influence of the richest man in the world, and now you've got probably people that contributed more than you can imagine to this win. And Kamala had
Yeah, I mean,
disclaimer,
Musk bought Twitter. So that was,
yeah,
yeah, that was as huge as it could get, I think, because that played a, that was a big thing as far as some of the,
absolutely,
the left was using that as a weapon previous, and by him buying it, that kind of changed the
yep,
playing field.
absolutely, absolutely. So for sure, and Kamala, did what normal politicians would do. And the word I heard was that she had raised $1 billion but that was through the normal channels. And people who write those checks, they're still there. You know what I mean? Elon Musk didn't need, and maybe he probably contributed money to Trump's campaign as well. But between Dana, Joe, and Elon, they didn't need to give money to sway to influence the election. All they had to do was provide the platforms, and Trump recognized that and took advantage of it. It's a move that hopefully somebody analyzes more in depth than me and you. But there, if you don't recognize that what they did was a stroke of genius, and you could I love when they say, the left as well, they say, Trump's voters are uneducated. Who's the uneducated one? They're at the cutting edge of what is coming in the future, and you guys are stuck in the past, is what it seems like. And I think this election is going to be a good proof of that. It'll be interesting next year, or next election cycle, what happens. Because I assume that we're going to get J.D. Vance, right? The vice president would step up to be the nominee.
No, no, no. I think he wants one of his kids to succeed him. I just get that. Why would Trump want someone like J.D. Vance when he could have one of his kids?
Well, here's the problem. I speculate on that. I don't think either Eric or Donald Jr. have the. I think they've got a lot of black guys in public. I think that they have almost a Kamala like. They're not that smart kind of
Well, Trump has a lot
image
of black
around.
guys in public too. It didn't hurt him.
I almost thought that Barron is the guy that they're going to groom for that.
Or
Now,
Ivanka. Ivanka Trump. She looked pretty solid.
we'll see. We'll see when she pops up again. We'll see when she pops up again. If Jared pops up again, in the close circle of things, those may be the people Elon Musk and Dana White types are replacing. I think that now there may be that interest of having one of your kids do that, but I don't. I think he also likes being the Trump, right now. So I'm not sure. Let's assume it's JD Vance, right? So JD Vance has already learned to play the game. How is somebody else going to step up on the Democratic side? It'd have to be somebody young. You could speculate who it would be. You wonder. 4 years before Obama won, Obama was just a Chicago mayor, I believe, and not really on the radar on the presidential level. He kind of got an upswell and all of a sudden became that superstar. And that's what the Democratic Party is going to need, I think, is a superstar to show up. They might elect to go with, oh gosh, I'm going to forget names here. Hold on. But Buttigieg is the one example because he's young and he had the look of that type of, you know, for lack of a better word, superstar, up and comer, young guy, that Kennedy feel of new blood kind of thing. at one point in his career. I don't know if he still has that. The other candidate that was really strong, if you look at it, since we didn't get a primary, and now we're talking politics, but we can have some fun. If you look at it, in 2020, because in the Democratic primary, you had Biden win, Biden's out. You had Elizabeth Warren, I believe, finished third. The second place finish was Bernie Sanders. So Sanders is also out because of age. Elizabeth Warren will also be 79 in 2028. So I believe she will be ruled out because of age. The number four finisher was Michael Bloomberg. So, and Bloomberg's 82 now, I believe. So, or will be 82 in 2028. But either way, the top four guys or top four candidates from 2020 cannot run in 2028. And the number five finisher was actually Amy Klobuchar. So between Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, I think you're looking at probably the top two guys, unless, then you have guys like Beto O'Rourke, Julian Castro. Tulsi Gabbard was in there, but she's moved over to the other side. Andrew Yang was there, but he's created a different party. Kamala, I guess, could present herself again, but I'm not sure that benefits him. So I think you're looking at Buttigieg and Klobuchar, unless some type of superstar pops up. That's my rough look at it, 4 years prior. So you hope somebody like an Obama on the Democratic side. And I'm a neutral party. I don't vote. I haven't voted since Bush Gore. But you on the Democrats, to keep it competitive, to see something interesting and make it worth our while to even watch. I think if Buttigieg and Klobuchar are not the best they seem to be the best candidates now. Either way, Klobuchar for president, Buttigieg as vice president, or vice versa. I think either one, that's what you're looking at in terms of the Democratic Party, unless an Obama type superstar comes up out of nowhere. So we'll see how that goes.
The Rock, Dwayne Johnson.
That's why we have a great country, because you can't rule shit like that out.
He's already lying about his past, which makes me think they're setting him up for a run to the president, because that's what you do. You lie about your past.
We'll see. It's interesting. Now we're getting, since this is the conspiracy hour.
You start setting up the stories, so you can run for president. You can lie about all of these things.
Let me tell you though. One of the things that has been pretty interesting that's been going on, that it is one of those things where if it plays itself out to the fullest, like for example, the Jeffrey Epstein situation did not play itself out to the fullest. But if the P. Diddy thing plays itself out to the fullest, Hollywood people that go down from that, who knows how wide ranging it is. But if you look at it, names that have already popped up that could be damaged by that whole scandal: Oprah, Kevin Hart, very closely associated to The Rock. And The Rock is floating around with that kind of money now, So worried about like a $15 million ranch with a lake in Georgia and stuff like that. The Rock and how he made his money in Hollywood and stuff like that could almost, I don't know if he'll go down, I'm just speculating, but that he's associated closely with several people that have already been named as in danger because of this trial coming up. So we'll see if they can circle the wagons, protect themselves, and Puffy is the only guy who goes to jail. But if that playbook comes out the way the Epstein one didn't, and they take down a net of people, who knows who will be damaged by that. So we'll see. It all ties in, because what you're talking about there is power and money. So it's different halls of power, the Hollywood power, different halls of power, but unfortunately, on the Democratic side, if they, in my opinion, make a mistake, they will allow those halls of power to push Gavin Newsom on us. And Gavin Newsom is one of those guys whose name's already been tossed around for the presidency. So there again, there's that 1%, and we're not in it.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting stuff. As always, like I said, I think you do a great job of setting the table for some of these discussions. And as always, with people watching this, as I had said before, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, support us, help us out. We put a lot of work into this stuff, and it's growing, but we want it to grow more. And as Miguel said, leave comments, we'll answer them within reason if they're, if they're worthy of being
Come on,
answered.
folks. Let's step up there. We'd like to give you more content as well, more consistency. I've been at fault with that, with a couple other things going on and stuff like that. But I'm dedicated to this because it's fun. On top of everything else, Todd's a great guy. We like to give the content out there. And let us know what else you want to hear about.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And as always, Miguel, appreciate it. It's always great catching up with you. And everyone that supports us, we appreciate it. And until next episode, take care.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Drew with High Fight IQ, and you are now watching the MMA Conspiracy Hour with my boys Todd Atkins and Miguel Iturrate. Miguel has been the matchmaker for over 200 shows worldwide and has worked with Hook and Shoot, Euphoria, Bodog, and ADCC. Make sure you subscribe to the Todd Atkins Show on YouTube. You can also find Miguel on his YouTube channel at MMA Collector 74. Don't forget to subscribe to High Fight IQ on all social media platforms. The House Call Sports on YouTube. The Fight Pit on YouTube. Now let's talk some fights, baby. Let's go.